Hello there. You are tuned in to Almost 30 Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. If you're new, thanks for being here. Make sure you're subscribed to the pod so you get new episodes once or twice a week. And if you're an OG, we appreciate your listenership. We know there's a lot out there, and thanks for growing with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. You don't
Literally.
need to be almost 30 to listen. You can be whoever you are, wherever you are. It was just the way that we started the show 6 years ago. And we've grown into a community, a brand, all of the things. And we talk about health, wellness, spirituality.
Today is one of those health focused ones that we love so much.
Such a good one.
Chock full of science, chock full of the moments where you're like, I'll never forget that.
100%. He is a wealth.
It's crazy. I'm just so fascinated by people whose brains are so turned on, who are like,
Yeah.
I don't even know. I'm thankful. I'm really, really thankful. Dr. Cabral is here with us today. He's the founder of EquiLife. He's an incredible line of supplements and health tests, and he has his own practice that has just helped thousands and thousands of people to feel their very, very best because he gives incredibly personal care, taking into account the physical, mental, emotional, the lifestyle, the environment that they live in, and so much trauma and so much more. It's like, it's my goal to find a doctor in New York who's like
Yeah.
that, to be
Yeah.
honest.
He's
Yeah.
close, Boston.
Yeah.
Should be
True.
close.
True.
He was on the podcast probably 4 years ago at this point.
Mhm.
Who knows what we even talked about? Probably the keto diet the whole time or something.
So tell me about the keto diet.
Yeah, literally. And I'm
I'm thinking of
plant-based.
trying it.
I'm eating a full avocado and nut butter in a shake for like breakfast. I'm bombing myself with all the fat in the world.
Oh,
I wanted to talk to Dr. Cabral about something that I saw on YouTube. And I know this is something all doctors probably have in their nightmares. People saying, I saw this on TikTok or I saw this on YouTube. But I saw this YouTube basically where this person, he's a fitness trainer, was talking about walking and the difference between his
Mm.
body when he did HIIT training and lifting and when he lifted and did walking only. So by removing the HIIT, he noticed such a difference in his body composition and his shape, and he felt so much better. And he explained it that when we go on the treadmills, how they have the different zones,
Yes.
and Orange Theory is keeping it in the orange zone. So it's like the different types of zones. But there's actually the fat burning zone, which is the lower zone. So you can get too high of a zone where you're actually just burning sugar and carbohydrates. And then your body needs to refuel the sugar and carbohydrates so you can get really hungry after. So
Mhm.
he recommended staying in the lower zone, the fat burning zone, which is walking and just walking instead of actually going up to the higher zones where you essentially burn more calories, but you're more likely to overfeed yourself after. And you're not actually burning fat, but you're burning carbs and sugar.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was doing intense high cardio and HIIT training more regularly, it's almost as if like my mind and body just kind of separated within the like
Yes.
intensity of that. So I would eat well beyond what I needed to fuel my body, but I was convinced that like that's what I needed because I was so hungry. And I'm like, wait, this feels weird and this feels off. It didn't feel like harmonious. So I mean, switching to low impact heavyweights, I'm not like freaking bench pressing 300, but I think slowing down and doing more mindful movement has been such a game changer. It's changed my appetite too. I'm no longer like just mindlessly like just going crazy.
Eating goat
Uh,
milk yogurt at 6 a.m.
totally.
That was Lindsay's fave.
It was good. It was really, really good.
In the car on the way.
But thinking of yeah, dude, the smell in my car would be wow. Um, but thinking about, yeah, like how we fuel our bodies at what time of day. The
Yes.
first, I used to fast a lot more than I do now. And I don't think that fasting is bad. I think it's dependent on like where I'm at in my cycle and all that stuff. But um no longer doing like cereal with banana and a nut milk in the morning. It's like the glucose spike,
Yes.
leaving me incredibly hungry just kind of going off the rails for the rest of the day. Whereas if I'm doing like a smoothie with a ton of protein and good fats and fiber and all that stuff, like I'm feeling good, I'm feeling balanced, I feel harmony in my bod.
Mhm.
And yeah, just being like more mindful about those things.
Yeah, I remember one time I was in a workout class. It was like a HIIT class, and I was with a friend. And I was noticing that I would look in the mirror in the class and I wouldn't be able to see myself
Mm,
because I'd be blurry, like my energy field. So, like when I see people, sometimes I'll see their energy fields, and
mhm,
if there's like, if there's something going on in their field, they're hard to see or reach.
mhm.
So, if they have a lot of like pain or trauma in their aura, if they're not in their body, it's hard to like see them.
Yeah.
And so I was looking in the mirror and I couldn't see myself. It's like I couldn't like make a full I see my eyes. I'm like able to clearly see my body, and it was like I was leaving my body every time.
Mhm,
So my
mhm.
energy was just all over the place. I wasn't in my body. I wasn't like feeling fully in, and I was feeling probably that cortisol level, being super
Totally.
high, but that for me was something where I was like, "Huh, this needs to change." And when I moved from New York to LA, it was like, "Whoa, we need to change what we're doing. We are working out
Mhm.
way too much." What are you training for?
Totally. I also think it's a checking of the box for a lot of people where they don't
Yes.
have time. They have like that one window in the morning or night
Yeah.
and they're like, "Let me go balls to the wall, say that
Yes.
I did it, earn my weekend out,
Yep.
earn my whatever." And I think it's that disconnect that actually takes away from the benefits that exercise can have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like a mindless thing.
I was thinking about too when I used to live in Chicago, I would only go outside if I was running.
Mm,
Like I wouldn't just go on a walk. I would go
totally.
run. Like it was
Totally.
like we're running
Mhm.
5
I'd be like,
miles.
"What am I doing out here?" If I was just
Yes,
walking,
exactly.
you're
Like
like,
what's the point of this?
yeah.
Where am I going? I'm so
Mhm.
grateful. I always look at the small increases in benefits of conscious or the increases in consciousness. People are walking. Walking
Mhm.
is
It's
trending.
popular.
It's
Mhm.
popular. Walking is huge, and walking is so, so good for the body. So that was one of the parts of the conversation. In this, we really hit on like the hot topics in health and wellness right now, that we wanted to cover. And it was such a powerful, I mean, every point I was like, oh, that's a TikTok. That's like a clip. That's
Mhm.
everything. And then we went over our test. So we took a complete minerals and metals test with EquiLife, which was incredibly informative,
Yes.
taking that and understanding what was going on from a body perspective, from a mineral perspective, and a metals perspective. And I was
Mm.
surprised that I have some metal
I
in my
know, dude.
body.
It kinda yeah, it kind of is overwhelming because I literally think a lot about water all the time,
Yeah.
and Sean laughs at me because I'm literally just on a fucking kick about, like, filtering the water, but also then just like I'm like, "This is important. I have fucking aluminum in my body."
Yes.
Actually, I don't think we have aluminum. I have a little bit of mercury. Maybe the
Copper,
aluminum's really low, but copper.
copper,
Um,
and mercury.
but man, it's like a bummer. I'm like, "Okay, how do I not get bummed out and, like, take action on this?" But,
I know.
um, yeah, it was very, very informative, and he goes over kind of what we might be experiencing if we have these higher levels or lower levels of these various minerals and metals. And what I loved too is just this proactive approach to, for example, if you have mineral levels that are like way too high and they need to be balanced out, there is another mineral that you can increase in order to balance out what's happening. And I really didn't know that at all.
Mhm.
So it was incredibly helpful because I feel like a lot of us are like, "Oh yeah, we should take what, so and so influencer is taking because they look amazing." We don't know what our bodies need. We might be getting too much calcium. We
Yes.
might, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
I think that's why these tests are so important. And I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to take a test. It's too much effort. Da, da, da. This is easy. We just sent in a little piece of our hair.
Yeah.
It was easy, easy, easy. So I highly recommend. Gives you so much information and so much to work with, and could be kind of the missing link in feeling better.
Yeah, so they say at EquiLife, if they have, a client or someone that they're working with that says they're stressed or tired or anxious or overwhelmed, this is what they first recommend to them. And that the reason for this is because if you're not balanced when it comes to your electrolyte or mineral levels, you're not going to be able to adequately deal with stress in your life.
Mhm.
So this is the test that really helps you to see how well your nervous system is handling stress, what stage of adrenal dysfunction you may be in, what your mineral reserves are like, and how you're dealing with higher levels of heavy toxic metals. So this is for people that potentially suffer from high stress, anxiety, overwhelm, mood disturbances, highs and lows in your energy, headaches, poor sleep. And for the heavy metal toxicity, the arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury are among the 4 of the most common heavy metals that cause health related issues. So, what's worse related to these heavy metals is that the exposure can happen in daily life, even when it's coming from skin and cosmetic products that are
Yes.
approved to put on our bodies.
Yes.
So, they test these exposure to high concentration of heavy metals and your electrolytes and the mineral imbalances, because mineral imbalances can impact your overall good health. In fact,
Mhm.
imbalances in minerals like iron, magnesium, potassium can not only cause fatigue, but could possibly be an indicator of a more serious medical issue later in life.
Yeah.
So it's really those early warning signs. So I think everyone in our audience can probably relate to those feelings. I think understanding your adrenal dysfunction, understanding your energy levels, and your overall toxicity levels are really, really important,
Yeah.
especially for women.
100%.
So I think this is powerful. So I'm excited that we're working with Dr. Cabral. We have an offer for you to be able to do this test that Lindsay and I did. Again, it was just a hair sample. It was super quick. And when you purchase this test, you get a 30-minute consultation call.
Yep.
So it's really great that
Major.
you'll be able to speak to someone and really, really understand your test.
Mhm.
That's one of the reasons why I love Dr. Cabral, is because they're super thoughtful about their education for folks and making people understand what these results mean so that they can make choices in their life.
Yeah, for the coaching call, you'll get a supplement plan, dietary guidance, sleep guidelines, stress reduction techniques, detox regimens, lifestyle changes. So it's really, really thorough. And as Krista mentioned, we have a special offer for you guys. So originally it's $199 for the test. You'll get it for $99.
Woo!
Completely worth it, y'all. Do it right now. StephenCabral.com/almost30. So StephenCabral.com/almost30.
$99. Get your test, figure out your levels, let us know what you found.
Mm-hmm.
I was very surprised. I was a little disappointed. I thought I would be better than I was, but now we're here. I can
Yes.
understand the heavy metals and I can support myself in feeling way better. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll hear in this episode how thorough it is and all of the information about it. So
Yeah.
that should give you a good insight of what you'll get.
For the hair, just FYI, so I got a haircut. I was like, "Yay, I can just, like, get it for the hair
Mhm.
test." So a haircut is taking the ends of your hair, which is actually probably, for me, a year old. So make sure you kinda go to it's like the back of your head a little lower so you'll never see it, but you wanna get as close to the root as possible, which I know sounds scary, but it's really not a lot of hair at all, which will give you the most accurate read.
As long as I'm not doing blood, dude. I'm sick of blood shit. I'm sick of it. They're like, all the testing, they're like, "Give us your blood." I'm like, "Stop."
Yeah, it's a murder over here
It
anytime you have to
is. Well, I had my cat scratches the other day and I was like, "What test can I take?" Because I was
Yeah.
bleeding. I was like, "What
So fucked
sample can
up.
I give? Because I'm bleeding already." So thank you, Dr. Cabral. Very excited about this partnership. Very excited to offer you
Mhm.
this test. This one is chock full. You're going to want to share it with your friends. It has so much information in it, and we are so grateful to be able to bring it through to you.
Thank you all for listening. Enjoy this one. If you loved it, share it with a friend. Get your notebooks out. I had so many moments where I was like, "Ah,
Mhm.
yes, okay, okay, okay." Once I know that, I will never forget it. So enjoy. If you want more from Almost 30, head to almost30.com. We have courses and programs, evergreen offerings like the sacredness of being single, the life edit, the law of one, our podcast pro programs. If you're a podcaster, soon to be podcaster, we're supporting you. You can access these at any time. We're just happy to serve you in this way.
I'm excited. You can follow me on Instagram. It's Krista. It's ITSKRISTA. You can follow Lindsay on Instagram. It's at Lindsay Simsick. And you can follow Dr. Cabral on Instagram at Stephen Cabral. It's StephenCabral.
Amazing. See you on the other side.
Bye.
Bye. Therapy, therapy, therapy. Number one for me. This is how I remain centered, focused, confident, in right relationship with myself and with other people. And I just can't recommend therapy enough. If you are someone that has been thinking about starting therapy, but the voice in your head says, well, it's too expensive. I don't have time. Will it even work? I don't want to go through the process of trying to find a therapist. I don't want to have to change a therapist. It gets so overwhelming when you think about the process, but let me make it easy for you. If you go to betterhelp.com/almost 30 right now, you can be matched with a licensed professional therapist. All of this is done online and it is private. It is safe. I just can't recommend it enough. It's also more affordable than traditional offline therapy. And I just love that they have that virtual component. So really you can do it from anywhere. You can also talk to your therapist when you're not in the session, almost like a chatty chat on the side. There are different ways that you can customize your experience with BetterHelp. They also have specialists, which is great. So if you're thinking about trying therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is a great option, convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. Just fill out that brief survey. It takes no time at all. And they make it really easy to switch therapists if by chance you don't like yours. So, ready for therapy? Raise your hand. Let's do this. BetterHelp.com/almost 30 to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/almost 30 to get 10% off your first month. Okay, I'm doing something different this holiday season. I'm actually pre-ordering gifts for people. And I have a lot of holiday parties I'm going to, whether it's Friendsgivings or various holiday parties around Christmas. And so in advance, I am sending my friends some Shrimu. Shrimu is artisanal plant-based cheeses. They are unbelievable. So full-bodied, creamy, cheesy, tangy. If you're a cheese lover, but you've been wanting to steer more plant-based, I could not recommend this brand enough. Their ingredients are of the best and highest quality and frequency. And the different flavors are so thoughtfully created. So one of my favorites is the birdie, which is inspired by camembert infused with truffle. It's so gorgeous. It's woodsy, it's aromatic. It's honestly a sensory masterpiece. And get this, the other day I was making dinner and I melted it into pasta. Okay. And it was like this truffle fettuccine Alfredo. It was so freaking good. They have incredible recipes on Shrimu. And for holiday orders, it's really exciting. They are giving everybody their exclusive how to build a beautiful cheese board guide, which could be so fun, a fun activity at any holiday party. So I'm excited. Again, my favorite is the birdie. I also, very close second favorite is the Gold Alchemy, which is like a smoked Gouda. But y'all, Julie Pyatt, who is the founder of Shrimu, you know her as Srimati, and her team have created something that is one of one and truly an experience to receive. So you can order by November 13th for Thanksgiving. So it'll ship out the 15th. It'll arrive by Thanksgiving. And then for the holiday time in December, order by December 11th, which will ship the 13th to arrive before Christmas. They ship the week before these holidays to avoid shipping delays due to the volume being shipped at this time. So they're very good about planning this out to make sure that you get your cheese. And what's great about this cheese, I actually have it frozen in my freezer as well. So I had it out, I had a little cheese board, and then I had so much left over. I was like, let me just put it in the freezer, take it out, let it defrost a little bit, and it's like perfect, fresh, delicious. Okay. What's also great, you can also now order gift boxes and ship to multiple addresses during checkout. This takes the hassle out of gift buying. So I'm buying for all of my friends before these parties. So you have a discount, 20% off all single orders and 20% off all four orders, the first four orders when you sign up for a subscription with the code almost 30 at shrimu.com. Shrimu.com, SRIMU.com. Use the code almost 30 for 20% off all single orders and 20% off the first four orders when you sign up for a subscription. This is the perfect gift. I'm so excited for you. Let me know what your favorite flavor is.
And in the YouTube, this guy was talking about fat burning and walking. He was talking about the fat or the results he had from walking versus when he used to do HIIT. and he lifts as well. So he was doing lifting and then he was doing HIIT for a while and then he was only walking and lifting at the same time. So he was saying that because you stay in the fat burning zone with walking longer rather than going to the point where you're burning sugar and carbs, he actually noticed a better difference in his body composition than when he was doing HIIT all the time. Have you heard that?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I always look at is who's the best in the field at what they do,
Mhm.
right? So, bodybuilders, you may not want to look like a bodybuilder or a fitness competitor, but they've dialed in their nutrition and their exercise. And traditionally, for the last 100 years, they would do low, steady state cardio or walking for 30 to 60 minutes every single day, especially as they were cutting down. And then their training would be very intense, not necessarily high intensity interval training, but certainly very intense sets that lasted for anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds that got their heart rate up and then it would come back down. So, since we know the biggest uh, absolute predicator for fat loss is nutrition, so we have to have our nutrition on point. And then what we want to do is at a low, steady state, we can absolutely do walking. So, for people that just don't enjoy doing long cardio or doing sprint interval training, which by the way is still great. So I'm not saying that it's not. They can do 3 days a week of weight training and 2, 3 days a week of some lower intensity cardio or walking every day for 30 to 60 minutes. That's the minimum though threshold I would look at. If you're really doing it for fat burning, you want to be walking for a good solid hour at a
Mhm.
time in order to be able to get that. Now, there's one other part to this, and I didn't really realize this until, let's say, about like 9, 10 years ago. I was working with a couple diabetics, and we found and we tracked, they were very religious about how they tracked all of their data. And so this was, I would say, at the advent maybe of continuous glucose monitors. And so we looked at what happened when they did a boot camp at night. What happened when they did weight training at night? What happened when they did cardio at night? What did it look like the next morning? Because we're always interested in that fasting glucose level the next morning after 8, 10, 12 hours of sleep. And the only thing that lowered glucose levels was low level cardio, not sprint interval training,
Wow.
not boot camps, nothing. And part of it is that the closer you move away from aerobic based metabolism, which is kind of what we're talking about right now, staying in that fat burning zone. Now, again, I know all the exercise people, and again, my background is in strength and conditioning and personal training, all that way back in the day. And so, yes, you never have to do cardio in order to get in great shape. However, it is very helpful. And the more you get away from cardio, meaning like the much more anaerobic it becomes, the more intense it becomes, the less fat you are burning, but it actually means that the more sympathetic nervous system dominant you become. So it means that you're actually pushing your cortisol levels. And if your cortisol levels increase, by proxy, your body will produce more glucose. So it will break down liver glycogen automatically. I mean, because your body is looking for a fuel source. And in order to fuel itself, it has to get it somewhere and it will do it from glucose at a high intensity level.
And it will, and that's why in those instances you can crave sugar more. So your cravings would probably increase because your body's looking for glucose to refuel the stores.
People have two different reactions. So, one, they do a really hard workout and it eliminates their appetite. And the
Mm.
reason is they're in fight or flight. So when you're in fight or flight, very high level stress, now it's not a good sign that this happened.
I know, I
But
was like,
Yeah.
"What are we doing?"
if you're in that state, your body knows, well, we can't digest any food right now. We're not going to make
Ah.
enough stomach acid. The blood's not near the stomach, so it's not a good idea to eat right now. But then the other people, well, they know, okay, cortisol levels increased. There was some liver glycogen breakdown, maybe even some muscle glycogen if you've been depleting carbs. So if you're low carbs and you're doing high intensity interval training, you're going to start to lose muscle, like without a doubt. And that's
Mm.
because your muscle stores are going to have what's left of glycogen. So you store between 90 to 120 grams of, let's just call it sugar in your liver, but hundreds of grams in your muscle stores. So when the liver is done, it's going to get it from somewhere because, again, cortisol is a glucocorticoid and it has to break down glucose in order to be able to fuel the fight or flight.
Mm.
Wow. What are the benefits of high intensity besides for heart rate? For your heart, is that the only benefit? Because I'm confused of why we've all been doing it for so long. If the benefits from what you say and from what I'm understanding seem to really be in the low impact steady state or the walking.
Well, I would say that there's multiple ways to achieve the same goal. And I think a lot of people like high intensity interval training simply because they feel like they're working out. They feel
Yeah.
like they're pushing themselves
Yeah.
hard. But you could do a true weight training
Totally.
routine plus low steady state cardio. And a lot of people say, well, that's, you know, there's a lot of negativity around that. And I was there myself. So when I was, 21, 22 years old to maybe like 30 years old, sprint interval training, and metabolic conditioning workouts, kind of like HIIT workouts.
Mhm.
That's all you need. And that is true. That's all you need to be able to transform your body. But for longevity based benefits and overall health benefits, not always in an anaerobic zone, but actually an aerobic based zone is healthy for the body. So you get anaerobic and you get aerobic, which um, extends these things called telomeres as well on your cells or your DNA, which and it has been, it's one of the 8 things that have been shown to contribute to overall aging.
Mm.
And it's all a greater oxidative stress as well. So again, I just am more preaching a balance with most things in general between some high intensity interval training or weight based training and some lower level, whether it's walking or cardio, could be biking, it could be some rowing, things like that.
Mhm.
So I think you can do both.
And what do you recommend as far as nutrition around a healthy amount of fitness during the week? So, especially related to carbs. So,
Hmm.
I'm wondering, like, is it best to have your carbs in the morning, midday, evening? Just so people, because I feel like I've heard it all and I'm kind of confused at times. I
Hmm.
go mostly intuitively, um, how I eat during the day, but I haven't been able to like really nail down like what works specifically for me. But what would you recommend if
Yes.
someone's active?
I mean, this is where it gets into, and so for me, you can say high carb, moderate carb, low carb, and you could be right.
Mhm.
That's the thing. And you could say high intensity interval training, or what I call is GEP. So we work with a lot of, since my background's in functional medicine and natural integrative health, we can't prescribe the same thing for each individual. If someone is completely burnt out, like hypothyroidism, low adrenal output from HPA axis dysfunction, we can't recommend high intensity interval training. We're starting with walking and then we're moving up to graduating to some low level cardio. Why? It's the least amount of stress on the nervous system.
Yeah.
And then after that, okay, we can do some body weight training. And then after that, sure, we'll do some weight training and then some sprint interval training, metabolic conditioning, high intensity interval training. So what I recommend is, okay, what do you need for your body type? If you're already a thin body type, that means you're probably more nervous system dominant, more fight or flight, higher metabolic rate. Do you really need to do the high intensity interval training? Most likely not. You're going to do some weight training to keep bone density there,
Mm,
some lower level cardio, some walking, and that's what balances your body. And then someone that they look at carbs and they start to gain weight, okay, well, we're going to do lower carbs, not low, not completely low, not gone, right? Not below 25, 50 grams of carbs per day. That's just going to be too much stress. We can get into that if you want. But then their exercise is going to be more intense. They have a more robust body naturally, and that's why we have to respect our body types, and their body can handle more. So unless their labs tell us differently, that's how we look at our different programs.
okay. Yeah, you were gonna say something.
I was just gonna, yeah, I was gonna ask the question on a thinner body type and the nervous system.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
that's a very interesting concept to think about someone's natural body type and how would their nervous system naturally genetically be different than someone that doesn't have a thin body type?
Yeah, it's where we start to get in the weeds a bit, but some of
Let's
my
get in the weeds.
internships were in Ayurvedic medicine.
Yes, I was thinking of
And
Ayurveda.
so, my background was sick between the ages of 17 and 27. So it was a long time of also soul searching and study. And nothing really worked.
Mm.
And I mean, I did all of conventional medicine, best doctors in Boston. I did a lot of natural health based practitioners. This was like the late 90s, early 2000s, and still didn't get the results I was looking for. So I'm like, I don't know, does anything work? Maybe it doesn't work for me. Maybe I'm that person. It works for everybody else, but not for me. There's a lot of people who believe that. Well, finally I did get something to work for me, and it's because I started to understand all of these things are true. And so when people are, preaching online this one specific way of doing things, there is a reason why they're getting results, but it's only going to work for maybe a third of the population. Two-thirds at best, a third never. And so when I started looking into Ayurvedic medicine, which is what my mentor asked me to look into, was the Vata body type. It's the thinner body type. We've got the Pitta. That's more of in between. It's moderate build. And then we've got the Kapha body type, which is a propensity to weight gain. But again, they all have positives then, right? So then 50 years ago, the somatotypes came along. And the somatotypes is a conventional medicine, psychological based profile where the Kapha body type, more robust body type. And again, I like that's no disrespect at all. We just know some people
Mhm.
are larger than others, and some people are thinner than others, and some
Mhm.
people are more muscular and athletic than others. Like that's just how their body's naturally built. Now we can all change our body structures, but only to a degree. So it's variances based on a bio-individuality. And so that kapha body type is typically in what they found more of the parasympathetic nervous system,
Mm.
more of the rest, relax, digest. In the US, it's hard to pin down that specific mindset, but overall, be more of a chill, calm individual. The Pitta mindset's more of the leader, more inflammatory based, good and
Fire,
bad,
right?
fiery,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And then the Vata is more towards the anxiety side, more towards the fight or flight based side, more difficulty sleeping. Where the Kapha, they can sometimes fall asleep right away. But again, this is just a psychological profile. Ayurveda goes very, very in depth, but it's one way of looking at it. And again, at the end of the day, we're running labs to back these things up too. So we're kind of looking at the individual, which in Ayurveda or the genotype is called the Prakriti. The Vikriti is actually where they're at right now in their life, understanding that how you were born and your genetics, they don't change, but the presentation does today. That's called the phenotype. So you can take two identical twins, they can live two totally different lifestyles. One is dialed in nutrition, dialed in exercise, they're in great shape for their body. And the other one, maybe they're 100, 150 pounds overweight, and they have some type of disease, diagnosed disease. Okay, well, they're identical twins. They're literally identical DNA. Why the change? And the change is in the lifestyle. That's the
Mm.
Vikriti. That's the phenotype. So everyone, you have your genotype, it's not going to change. Those SNPs that you hear about sometimes, the single nucleotide polymorphisms, that's what allows for the expression of disease, weight gain, weight loss, because you can be underweight as well. We work with a lot of people underweight. And so these are all things that I think need to be explored more in our industry. And that's so that people are a little bit gentler on themselves, not comparing themselves to like, oh, I should be like that person. Well, probably not, unless you have the same genetics and the same predispositions, you live the same lifestyle.
Yes.
So the expression of the nervous system could be a genotype, part of their build.
That's right.
And then it also could be is it xenotype or could it also be like, because I'm just trying to think what comes first? The
Mhm.
nervous system being that way when they're born, or their life kind of creating that nervous system experience?
Yeah, I think it's both. So there's the nature and the nurture, right?
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. Like, what if you had a deep level of trauma when you were younger? What if you have a high stress job? You're working 14 hours a day. Okay, well, that means that your expression is going to be more towards that vata. So you might be someone that is naturally a kapha body type, but you're underweight for your body type. Or you have anxiety, difficulty sleeping, and that wouldn't be normal for who you are. And so we always want to bring our body back to balance. Nobody else is balanced except our own. Now, the nice thing is, typically, we're not just one thing. So we are a blend. So we might have a Vata predominantly dominant type, let's say 65%. Then we might be, 30% one thing and 5% the other. So there's like the subtypes of that. And there's only 10 maximum. So we're not looking at a wild variety in general. And a lot of people, they say, well, this is, a little bit too out there. But the truth is, all of these things have actually been studied. There's actually scientific research on every single one of these things. And we know that high sympathetic nervous system is one of the biggest predicators to disease, especially Alzheimer's.
Wow.
Oh, say more.
Well, because Alzheimer's is a so when you look at Alzheimer's now, here's the amazing thing, and I won't go, I'll get as deep in the weeds as you want. But there's 25 markers that we look at for Alzheimer's now. And in really good conventional medicine-based studies, they've shown that 90% or more of all cases of Alzheimer's can be reversed. So
Wow.
this information is not out in the general public. So when they did this research, they found that they had one particular case that couldn't be reversed, and it was terminal-based Alzheimer's case. All the rest could. And so they looked at, well, what's causing the different factors for Alzheimer's? And like most things, it's what I call filling up the rain barrel, right? It's not one thing. So it's high levels of cortisol, which can then lead to high levels of blood sugar. I think that's one of the most overlooked issues of health in our society and culture.
Blood
Is
sugar?
that, well, stress leading to high blood sugar.
Mm.
So you can wake up in the morning with totally normal glucose. We measure this all the time, just with a simple saliva sample.
Mhm.
And what happens is your worry about the day, getting the kids ready, or your cup of coffee spikes your cortisol levels. And when you spike cortisol levels, your body, and so what happens is you have a hypothalamus pituitary gland in your brain. Those get signals. So it's from the peripheral nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. So it's just sensing feedback. That's it. But that's why these things can be controlled. So it's sensing stress. So what does it do? It ramps up norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter, right? And adrenaline. And then right after that, from the adrenal cortex gets cortisol. And cortisol is a glucocorticoid. So it's literally cortisol creating glucose for fuel. Because when you are in fight or flight, you can't be like, oh, I'm just going to tap into body fat stores. It doesn't work that way. When you're in a stressful state, you have to use glucose. That's the way
Mm.
the body works. So you can be in a keto diet, not on a keto diet. It honestly does not matter. When your body is in a fight or flight based position, it has to rely on glucose. That's the oxidation system that it uses. So you can use creatine phosphatase, you can use oxygen, you can use sugar, but you're using parts of each one, but you are dominant in one. So what happens is any of those stressors can raise your blood sugar, and without you eating any carbs. So that's why we can't be we have to be careful what we say is carbs are the enemy. I see people trying to like never eat a carb because they're so worried about spiking insulin levels. I said, well, again, I think that's a reductionist conventional medicine approach to
Mhm.
overall health, because carbs are the one food that also cuts cortisol. So should we eliminate them completely,
Hmm.
or should we just be a little bit maybe smarter in the amount that we eat, the type that we eat, and when we eat them? I think that's probably a better way to look at it.
How do carbs cut cortisol? And what type of carbs would do that?
So carbohydrates produce in the body typically dopamine, serotonin, and they give the body what it's looking for when it's in a state of stress, which is sugar. And so again, you can say, well, my goal is to become fat adapted. I totally understand. And we were just talking about that with the walking and with just, but when we look at the overall scheme, if people are not as familiar with the fat burning zone, you actually burn the most fat when you're sleeping. And
Hmm.
so you might say, well, that doesn't make sense. And I would say, yeah, to a degree, I agree. And that's because it's the greatest percentage of fat, but it's not the greatest amount of fat. So you're burning more fat when you're doing metabolic conditioning workouts, like because you're burning more total calories. So even if it's less of a percentage from that, you're still burning more body fat. So because you're burning more total calories, and if you're at a specific deficit, you will lose weight. So when we look at carbohydrates, though, we're looking at what are the energy needs of the body, and the energy needs of the body, especially when in a stress-based state, are carbohydrates. You gave the body what it was looking for; it can relax.
Okay. Okay. And what types of carbs like are you recommending to people?
So one of the best studies that I just saw recently is I'm always I don't have a particular diet that I have to give people,
Sure.
but it's always based around the Mediterranean diet.
Mm.
So I try to stay completely unbiased. I always say I have no dog in the race. I don't care what diet is best. I really don't. I don't care what form of medicine is best. We use every form of medicine in our practice. If it's conventional medicine based, if we have to last resort, we'll refer out for that. That's not what we do. So what I will say is this: they looked at two different diets. It was the Mediterranean eating plan, they called it. It's actually MIPA for Americans because they have to develop a special one for Americans
I
because
mean,
Americans'
Of
diet is so
course.
terrible. So they made
honestly.
it about 42% carbs as the macro, is about 20% protein and about 30 something percent fat. And they looked at it, and these people were lowering their blood sugar levels, they were lowering their disease, lowering their inflammatory markers. And they looked at, well, what's the standard American diet? Well, it's about 46% carbohydrates. But it's the same one that causes type 2 diabetes for the predominance of it. So how
Mm.
can that be the case? Totally different food choices. So totally
Wow.
different. It's processed foods versus, well, what's a Mediterranean diet? And again, do I think the Mediterranean diet could be improved to a certain degree? Sure. I don't think that you necessarily need bread and pasta. But when people think of the Mediterranean diet, they always go right there. But it's actually berries, low glycemic fruits and
I just think
vegetables.
of olive oil.
Exactly. Well, olive oil is such
Like,
a big part of it.
Olives.
The
yeah.
predominance of the Mediterranean diet from fat is almost all olive oil. Some nuts and seeds, yes, but those are still monounsaturated fats. So they're still not pinning down exactly where the benefit of the Mediterranean diet comes from. Is it the high fiber, 30 plus grams a day? Is the high level of olive oil? Is it the lower levels of saturated fat? And I know, people don't like to say that saturated fats, it's perfectly fine for you. Again, there's a lot of studies that show saturated fat does not affect blood levels for like 72% or 76% of the population. But people with what's called a specific ApoE genotype, it's called an allele and it's a 4. If you have that in your genes,
Mm.
you can't clear cholesterol as well.
Oh,
So for
okay.
26% of the population, we know that for them, a higher fat diet, so someone on a keto diet who has this specific allele, is actually quite dangerous.
Mm.
Now, that's for 26% of the population. Okay,
That's a lot, though.
74, it is. That's what I'm saying. That's why I think we have to be careful with our all for one mentality online of recommending
Mhm.
this is the absolute best thing ever. You should only eat red meat twice a day or 3 times a day.
I think the Mediterranean, it's like, I think it's one of those things where we're like, why isn't this working? It's like, because they're probably spending more time outside, spending more time with their family,
Mhm.
eating around people they love, eating less, like the soil is
Cooking their
probably
own
better,
meals, growing their
cooking
own
their own
food.
meals. Yeah, it's probably so many other factors that are contributing to it than just the food.
So I completely agree with that. And that's for longevity, I would say.
Yeah.
For when I'm looking at what are the for I always and I love talking about this point, and I really want to do more around this. There's four main reasons why we humans die. It's cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, and stroke. Those go together. Type 2 diabetes and the complications from that, which can also lead to Alzheimer's, which is called type 3 diabetes. And then there's cancer.
Mm.
But if you don't die from cardiovascular, blood pressure, and stroke, you don't get type 2 diabetes, and you don't get cancer, your likelihood from living to like 75 to 78 years old goes up an extra decade. So those are 75% of all the reasons why people die, those four things. So if we can control those four, we absolutely can, by the way, just through literally like moving the body, the things that you just spoke about right there.
Mhm.
We're going to live minimum
Mhm.
late 80s, early 90s. So it's a great thing to look at. But when you separate out the Mediterranean, like the blue zones, let's say, right? Separate out all the social aspect, the lower stress. That's such a big one. And you just look at the diet. Well, they've compared the diets, and they found that MIPA diet versus the standard American diet or the regular diet very close in terms of macros, totally different in terms of micros. So when you're looking at, okay, well, what are the percentages from here? What are the types of foods, the vitamins, the minerals? Very, very different.
So
So
those are
it's
micros, vitamins and minerals?
vitamins, minerals, omega-3s, the certain
Okay.
compounds that make up those
Mm.
foods.
Okay.
So you could eat 42% of carbs and it could come from just bread and pasta.
Yeah.
But the real secret behind a lot of these diets where people are living longer are the phytochemicals. It's the anthocyanins, those bright blues and wild blueberries. It's all the colors of the rainbow that people are getting that I think we have to be careful calling them plant toxins, right? Because in the research,
Who's
these
saying
are the
plant toxins?
things. A lot of people.
Really? What are they saying? Tell me more.
Yeah.
I've actually never heard that.
Well, believe it or not, like all these colors are the reason why we fight cancer. It's the only anti-cancer diet that we know is brightly colored fruits and vegetables. Now, I'm not saying you only have to eat fruits and vegetables, but they should balance out your diet. And so there's a lot of people out there that are talking about oxalates, salicylates, they're talking about lectins, they're talking about plant toxins, phytic acid. And the problem is that there are a lot of people when they eat vegetables or they eat fruit, they get bloated. They've got digestive issues, they get inflamed, they have joint pain. And when they stop eating those foods and they do like meat only, a carnivore diet or something like that,
Yeah.
they feel much better. And to them, I would say, yeah, you found what works for you. However, what you didn't find was the underlying root cause as to why fruits and vegetables are causing those issues in the first place. Because probably when you were 8 years old, you didn't have the Hashimoto's, you didn't have the rheumatoid arthritis, you didn't have the high cholesterol, you didn't have whatever it was. So why now? And in the vast majority, if not all of those cases, they're going to find candida overgrowth. They'll find SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. They'll find H. pylori. They might find parasites. And certainly there's intestinal permeability and leaky gut. So my recommendation is when you find symptoms, don't try to palliate them right away, whether it's through nutrition or through
Mm.
whatever means it may be. Like any biohacking based technique, I'm not against them. What I'm saying is that gave you a clue that something is off with your body right now. Let's fix that before it actually becomes a true disease.
So how would you test for something like a leaky gut? Or would that be just kind of a physician, you know, kind of going into a physician to see if you have leaky gut? How does someone know? Because I feel like a lot of people have digestive
They
issues.
do.
Mostly
fe-
women.
Yeah, I feel like
What's up
everyone
with
I
that?
talk to.
Every woman I know is like, my belly. I think
Yeah.
it's people are not speaking their truth. They have
Mhm.
solar plexus. Like their solar plexus chakra is a little off. It's
Mm.
like a nervous system thing. It's like an embodiment thing. It's a stress thing.
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
Mhm.
But that's so people always ask me, what's the one thing I can do to get better? And, there's not one thing, right? So there's no one thing. But if I could choose one, maybe two, a 1A and a 1B, it would be to help women and men. So about 75% of our practice, 80% of our practice is women, always has been. I think that women are much more prone to being able to talk about it than
Mhm.
men. So I think men have a lot of those
Yeah.
digestive issues, but they're just like, oh, it's totally normal.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
that's
but
so
probably
true.
not.
Yes.
And then there's the gut. But what you just said right there, stress can actually cause a slowdown in peristaltic movement of the digestive system. So we have our mouth and around 12 to 16 inches of esophagus. Then it goes into our stomach. Then our stomach, it's going to sit there for anywhere from 30 minutes to 3, 4 hours to digest the food. Then it moves into the small intestine. That's like 20 feet. And we've got another 5, 6 feet of colon. There's a lot going on inside that digestive tract. So what happens? Well, everything moves without you asking it to move. Like you don't have to do that, right? And so what happens is when you're stressed, well, that peristaltic movement slows down. So that can then lead to your own bacterial overgrowth. Or you have something called your ileocecal valve that's in the right side of your, basically, it's like 4 or 5 inches down from your right side of your rib cage. That's where the small intestine moves food into the colon. Now, the colon is supposed to be its own separate place. That's your large intestine. Same thing. And it's never supposed to go in reverse. It's a one-way street. And if it does, you can give yourself SIBO. So the bacteria from the colon is called the lower esophageal sphincter. Actually, that's your stomach. That's for acid reflux. We can talk about that later. But your ileocecal valve actually allows colon bacteria to come up into your small intestine. And the only people that we found in our practice who typically relapse are those people who have not addressed the stress. So we can fix the gut issues because what happens, again, it's really only four things: H. pylori, or in the stomach. We've got parasites in the intestines. We've got SIBO, the bacterial overgrowth, and we've got yeast overgrowth. Okay, we can fix all those. Naturally, we can rebalance the gut. And that's a good thing because you learn so much during the process. And it's not overnight. It's a 12-week protocol. But again, it's not that bad. And the issue, though, while you're going through that, though, there has to be a process of dealing with what are the underlying anxieties and stresses in your life. Because if those are not addressed, if it's not your gut, it's going to lead to something else. Maybe it's thyroid, maybe it's cortisol, maybe it's estrogen dominance. One of the main things we see in our practice: 8 out of 10 women have estrogen dominance. It's one of the reasons for infertility, but it's also one of the reasons for lower mood, for bloating during the last 7 days or so of your cycle,
I think that's a
for
birth
adult
control
acne.
thing.
Certainly part of it, but what I would say is this: is that women who, because we work with a lot of women who are trying to get pregnant as well, takes them 3 or 4 months just to normalize their cycle, and that's with help. And then still, the major reason why women become estrogen dominant is stress.
Mm.
And that's because when you see cortisol levels go up, you see progesterone levels start to decline. So actually, most women won't notice anything really off for the first 14 to 19 days of their cycle, which is more the follicular phase. We've got ovulation, then we start the luteal phase, but the luteal phase doesn't peak out until around day 19, 20, 21. So we see it around then when progesterone should be high, but if it's not, well, estrogen stays normal, but progesterone is lower. So they get the headaches, lower mood, night sweats, not menopause, but they start to feel all of these same symptoms.
Mm.
And so that's a real good giveaway that the hormones are imbalanced. But again, so what do? Do you just give progesterone? No. I mean, that's not my recommendation because you need to fix what was the underlying root cause. Most likely it was elevated stress and cortisol.
Wow.
Is there any correlation to hormones and the gut as well? I don't think I've ever asked that, but I just was thinking about like how much the gut microbiome obviously affects mental health, affects so much, but is it connected to hormones?
If we look at serotonin, there's a famous statistic that says 90% of all the serotonin is made in your gut. Now, it has to move from your gut towards your brain and the rest of your body, but it is absolutely manufactured in your gut. The other thing, though, is your B vitamins like B12 are also manufactured and used in the gut. So when we look at overall stress, okay, well, we need enough vitamin C, we need enough vitamin D, we need enough serotonin being produced, we need all of our B vitamins, not just a B12 or a folate. So I never take a like silver bullet approach to anything. I don't think there's any one thing because I tried it all. I mean,
Sure.
again, like I would say, oh, ashwagandha is going to heal all of your stress. Great herb, but probably not. It's like, okay, ashwagandha plus binaural beats, going for a walk, meditation, choose whatever your favorite modality is to
Mhm.
unwind. Plus, make sure you have enough B vitamins to be able to make all these things work. And it's fairly interesting too, because when you look at it, there's like the thyroid is a pretty simple gland, but it's often 1 out of 5 women. Okay, so like if you're walking down the street, here in New York, you could say like, okay, just walk by 100 women. We've got what 20 or so who have low thyroid, functionally low thyroid. And now the reasons are not super complex, but they're never tested for in conventional medicine. You're looking at selenium, you're looking at zinc, you look at something like vitamin B6. Like before women, because it mainly is women, unfortunately, that are put on antidepressants, which again, I agree, in some cases, these pharmaceuticals are necessary. But if you're low in B6, you can't convert uh, tryptophan to 5-hydroxytryptophan without that B6. And I think that's really important. Like, so you're not going to
Mm.
make tryptophan to 5-hydroxytryptophan to serotonin. And there's a jump, and you need B6. You need selenium as well. But if you're low in it, which a lot of people are, well, then you're not making it in the first place. And so I think we have to look at, again, like the real levels of health in the body that why do people get sick in their 30s and 40s? Well, it's just gradual decline. That's all. Like it's a
Mm.
gradual decline of stress and life building up.
So that's why. So because of the relationship between 5-HTP and serotonin, that's why people take it after taking drugs.
They do because their levels will
Yes.
drop so low.
Okay.
So if you use something like ecstasy or
Yes.
whatever the drug may be,
Yes.
that's going to spike your levels very high and you feel great while you're on it. Well, you get that subsequent dip.
Yep.
And when
Mm.
you have that dip, well, then you feel depressed.
Yep.
And so they're using 5-HTP to just potentially make more of that serotonin. Now, the interesting thing is when you go on an SSRI, which is a
Yeah.
selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, it's not making more serotonin. It's just opening up the pathways. So it's not necessarily recycled. It keeps more in what's called the synaptic cleft so that when you need it, it's there, but it doesn't make more. But at the same time, I have to tell people you can't just take 5-HTP if you're on an
Yeah.
SSRI because it can be dangerous. You can actually
Wow.
get serotonin poisoning. So
Wow.
Should we be able to, just on the point of, you know, whether it's being low in selenium or B6 or all of these different vitamins and minerals, should we be able to ideally get all of them from food, or is that kind of impossible in the world in which we live, especially in the US?
yeah, it's a tough one. I used to believe that we could get it all from food. I really did, and I think that there was a time before the 1960s or so when there wasn't a level of soil degradation when we could. I do
Yeah.
believe that. But when you look at food now, even organic, it does not have the same micronutrients, so that's the vitamins, minerals, etc., in the food that it did before the 60s. One of them, even if it's organic, if we look at it, a lot of it's monocrop based in the same soil every single time. The soil doesn't have the same level of bacteria, which is important because that's how the reuptake of those nutrients happens. And they don't use real manure anymore. A lot of times we don't like to think of our food grown in manure, but it's the
Mhm.
healthiest way to actually get those minerals and the different bone dust, et cetera, in there. But the other part is that we don't use a three-field system anymore. So it's one crop after the other crop after the
Mhm.
other crop. The soil never regenerates.
So the
Mm.
So
three field is like where it's like the different processes of growth, allowing that, correct, within a
yes,
farm.
I forget the movie right now too, but they basically showed the animals are moving. Like the cows are in one field, they're eating the grass, all of that.
Yep.
They're
Ah.
dropping the manure. The chickens are coming in next, and then they're doing the next field. But the three field system is two of the three fields are always being used. The one field is off for a season so that it can regenerate.
Yeah.
So when we look at a
Uh-huh.
lot of these, and I love the whole movement for regenerative
Mhm.
farming. Like it makes total sense. If we want to be able to have great quality food, we need our soil to be healthy in the first place. And so I don't believe in mega dosing nutritional supplements. I really don't. I think you can feel phenomenal in the short term. So in certain cases, 12 to 16 weeks, okay. Mega dosing, no, but a higher dose, okay. And then I believe in just a um, small dose of certain vitamins and minerals in order to be able to safeguard against the nutritional deficiencies of food in general. And I'll be honest, most people just don't have a varied diet. And so
Mhm.
like they're eating good foods. But I mean, when I ask people, like typically, like, let's be honest, how many different vegetables are you eating in a week? And even myself, like I eat broccoli
Mhm.
basically every day. But it's
Mhm.
simple, like it's my go-to.
Yeah.
But I'm not eating like all the blues, oranges, purples, yellows. And so all I'm doing is getting a little bit every day of my micronutrients that I need. And then I try to eat the best diet I can.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Like we're missing the seasonality of things. And I was
Yes.
thinking about that too, living in Los Angeles. I was like, I eat well, but I'm really eating the same things, like in the same sort of macro and micronutrients all the time. Um, I want to talk about glucose because I feel like this is sort of a conversation where people are way more interested in their blood sugar
Hmm.
and their blood sugar levels and understanding them. I think most people are interested in it because they have heard of a correlation between like your weight and fat and
Mhm.
blood sugar and your body composition. So I guess is there truth to that or what is the relationship between blood sugar, your weight and your body composition?
Yeah, it's a hard one because when you look at this, and this is what we before I opened my functional medicine practice in Boston, I had essentially a nutrition personal training studio, and all we did was help people transform their bodies. Like that's literally all we did. Hundreds of thousands of appointments, and the easiest way to do that is through metabolic conditioning workouts and a lower carb diet with a little bit extra protein so they don't become too catabolic and a slight caloric deficit. You don't even need a large caloric deficit. A lot of people say you do to a degree. I think most people's bodies are dramatically inflamed.
Mhm.
And so a lot of this weight that we're holding is what we like to refer to as like toxic water weight. And people don't like that word toxic, but When you're inflamed, you're holding a tremendous amount of puffiness in your body. That's not body fat. That's water that never needs to come back. So we have body fat, then we've got this inflammation, and we're working on that. So now, kind of bringing it up to speed, what we do is we do a very specific functional medicine detox, and we also program called the Fatlocity program. I don't love the name, but it is what it is. And it's low carb for 21 days because it works. Like, we know low carb works. The problem is this: I would say for the vast majority of women, if you continue with a low carb diet, meaning just vegetables, so we say unlimited amount of vegetables because we're going for 2 to 3 cups with every meal. And then we've got lean proteins, whatever you like, vegan, paleo, etc. And then we've got healthy fats, typically avocado, olive oil. You can have other types as well, so coconut oil, things like that. Okay. So pretty basic, like nothing revolutionary there. Okay. What's works though is that you cannot maintain that diet for most women. Because what we found is this. So then we're bordering more towards, again, like people could say that's a keto-based diet. It's not a keto diet. A keto diet cannot be high protein. So a lot of people are eating high protein diets, eating steaks and all that, saying they're on a keto diet. If you were to test for ketones, I'm guaranteeing you're not showing ketones unless you're only eating 1 meal a day where you're going on an extended fast. Because protein is made up of amino acids, which can be converted to glucose. Like if your body needs it, it will convert it to glucose. Like it has no problem doing that. And so what we're looking at is, okay, 3 weeks, reset the body's overall hormone, glucose levels, etc. But then we need to start to reintroduce carbohydrates. So we actually are typically going with a low glycemic berry in the morning, typically like wild blueberries as part of a smoothie or something like that. We're cutting cortisol, we're fixing thyroid levels because thyroid levels will plummet in women. This is what we've seen. We've run hundreds of thousands of labs. We've met with over 250,000 client appointments. We have a massive amount of data. And again, I have no dog in the race. I don't care what diet is best. But I'll tell you, women following a low carb diet for more than 4 to 6 weeks typically causes their TSH to begin to rise above a 3. That's a sign that you're moving into hypothyroidism.
That's testosterone.
Thyroid stimulating hormone.
Okay.
So in some women, with that stress, their testosterone will go up, progesterone will go down, they'll be estrogen dominant, and so now this is the beginning of PCOS. You might say, well, PCOS is also predicated by these higher levels of glucose. Yeah, it can be, but that starts with the stress as well.
Wow.
So what we do is we say yes to a low carb diet to settle things out. But if you've already been on a low carb diet for the last 2 years, then 21 days isn't going to do anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's like if you're going and you just said, I give up for the last few months. Okay, we're going to reset you with that. But then we have to be able to get your body adapted to be able to eat carbohydrates again. You have to be able to eat carbohydrates. If not, you just eliminated an entire macronutrient group and you only have 2 others, protein and fat. And there's a lot of people that will try to convince you that you only need those 2. It's not true for a well-working nervous system. And by the time you get to your 40s and 50s, it's not happening. Maybe in your 20s you can get away with a lot.
Yeah. Are you talking about carbohydrates because glucose is converted or carbohydrates are converted into glucose?
That's right.
Is that okay?
So that's why people are most concerned about
With
that.
carbs, right?
Because you're really not going to get a protein. So it's actually not true. And that's why I don't think you need to do it forever. But using a continuous glucose monitor
Yeah.
is really helpful.
Yeah.
Now, in the beginning, though, if you're someone who has imbalanced blood sugar, you will react to all your carbohydrates. But if, let's say, you eat a meal and it is like just a whey protein shake. Okay, well, a whey protein shake will certainly spike your blood sugar levels. There's no sugar in that. Why? Well, because the glycemic load of that and whey protein in an empty stomach will spike blood sugar levels.
Oh.
A coffee, if it puts you into fight or flight, will spike your blood sugar levels because it will spike cortisol levels in some people, the caffeine. So not a decaf, but a caffeinated beverage will. And then you start the glucose-based response. And so, again, our job is to be able to incorporate an intermittent fast, 12, 14, or 16 hours, depending on the individual. But we also want to get in 3 meals per day. I know a lot of people are doing 2 now, but if we go back to those micronutrients, how do you get all the micronutrients you need in 2 meals a day? So, and there is something to being like people are getting or trying to be so thin that they're catabolic. They're breaking down their hair, their skin, their nails. They're aging their bodies faster than they need to be because their bodies are always at a deficit. So I think we have to be careful too. Okay, in the short term, sure, you're thinner. But in the long term, you're really wearing your body out because you're operating below your capacity of fuel.
Yeah, I think that, that idea of, especially people I think around our age are really eating and adjusting lifestyle and supplementing and all these things for now,
Yeah.
which is, it makes sense. And we're also, not thinking about 10, 20, 30 years from now and what it could be doing. And so, yeah, I'm just wondering, I guess, what would you say to people our age? Maybe there's one or two things that they could do more or less of, eat more or less of, um, in order to kind of optimize that longevity and like youthfulness or vibrancy in later years.
It always comes back to create an equilibrium or balance in your body. So that was the greatest thing I learned really through all of my studies is just and for myself as well, is that you can pretty much do whatever you want if you balance it. So if you're an Olympic athlete, guaranteed you're not sleeping 8 hours a night. You're sleeping like 10, 11 hours a night because you're training 5, 6 hours a day. Well, I can't train 5 or 6 hours a day, work 10 hours a day, have a family, and like it doesn't work. So whatever you're doing, your output has to match. So I always say this to people because we work with a lot of people with like post-viral syndrome or myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is like basically flu-like symptoms all the time, or Addison's disease, or
Mm,
adrenal burnout, whatever you want to refer to it as. And I always say to these people, because I was one of those people, I say you have to look at everything you're doing for the next few months or so. Is this bringing in energy, or am I giving out energy? Because you need to bank some energy. You need to bring it in. So if you are someone that's feeling worn out, depleted, irritable, overwhelmed, tired, low energy, low libido, low vitality, should you be doing high intensity interval training, low carb, low calorie, work, 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 not a lot of sleep? That's a recipe for disaster. You can push through that for a while. Like you can just caffeinate your body and, you know, take some neurotransmitter precursors and just go. And that's why it's dangerous because you can push through it, but the end result is going to be much worse than if you started to create that balance now. Now, the good news is when you are healthy, so I'll just give an example. I am very fortunate that I got healthy before my first daughter was born 10 years ago because when you first have a baby, there's not a lot of sleep going on. And
mhm.
so what happens is if I wasn't in a healthy state, that would have pushed me into much deeper relapse of
Mm.
sickness and disease. So, but the nice thing is, for a certain period of time, like in college, studying for your finals, or in work, a project that needs to get done with a deadline, you can do that when you're healthy. Then you get your extra rest and you kind of go with it after that. But if you are someone dealing with a real disease, you need to take a period of time where you're bringing energy in. So, all
Mm.
the negative relationships and the negative stress, you need to distance yourself. And I did that actually when I was stressed. I distanced myself from a while from the family, friends, coworkers, or whatever that I felt were not a positive influence in my life. Kind of drew within a little bit for a period of time, hung out with the people that I felt were like nurturing and that I could be relaxed, that it was just me. And and that was actually a big part of what I would say my treatment was actually
Wow.
finding that balance because I'm a go, go, go person by nature. So I feel myself getting there all the time. And I'm like, all right, we just need to
Mhm.
bring it back.
Yeah, powerful.
How would people be able to tell the difference between toxic water weight, like any water weight from inflammation, and body fat?
Edema is one of the easiest ways to look at it. So if we think about it, let's say we stop consuming water at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And so you might wake up at 6, 7, 8 in the morning. If you were to weigh yourself, and I know not everybody's into weighing themselves, which is totally fine, you might be 5, 6 pounds lighter in the morning.
Mhm.
And you could say, well, that's dehydration. True. But during the course of the day, getting 1%, of your body weight or so, maybe 2%, that's not abnormal because you are slightly dehydrated overnight. You're losing like a liter of water just through perspiration overnight. But some people gain tremendous amount of weight just over the course of that day. And that can be from food sensitivities, environmental sensitivities. It can be from, like I said before, thyroid function. But then there's just general edema. So we'll have someone do like our 21-day functional medicine detox. They could lose 10 to 21 pounds in that period of time. Is that all fat? Absolutely not. No, they're losing massive amounts of inflammation. With inflammation comes water. So that's why when people go on a low carb diet as well, they'll often lose the water weight because there can be some water retention with carbohydrates. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It actually gives, I know people don't like to use the word, but tone to your body
Mhm.
and muscles because your muscles are 72% water. But it's important to look at that. Now, if you were to depress, like let's say you just wore socks and you see lines after you
Mhm.
take the socks off, that can be a lymphatic issue. That can actually be edema or excess water weight that you should not be holding. Sign of a
Mm.
poor lymphatic system potentially.
Wow.
Mm.
So rebounding, sauna, those types of things are really great for that.
Edema.
Yeah, for edema. Yeah.
Okay. For edema is basically holding on to water weight.
Edema, exactly, is holding on to water weight. Mostly we see it in the face or we see it in the ankles.
So
Mhm.
is inflammation manifest as mostly water retention, or can it manifest in other ways?
Yeah, that's the uniqueness of the individual.
Okay.
So inflammation is often looked at as the root cause of disease, but inflammation is simply the level right before disease. So if you
Mm.
look at Ayurvedic medicine or bioregulatory medicine, there are 6 phases of disease. The last 2, it's manifested, but before that, there were 4 phases that took place before that disease showed up in your blood work. And that's why blood work is not always the best metric for overall health. It is the best metric for diagnosing disease, but not the best metric for health. So what happens is there has to be a reason for the inflammation. So the inflammation has a root cause. So the root cause might be, again, food sensitivities, hormones, digestive issues, heavy metals, etc. And then those things cause the inflammation. And then the inflammation causes whatever we are predisposed to. So I will never have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid issue. But when I was 17, I got rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, I'm a 17-year-old with an autoimmune issue. How is that possible? Well, all 4 of my grandparents and both of my parents had rheumatoid arthritis.
Wow.
So they got it though when they were in their 40s and 50s. Why did I get it at 17? I just sped up those genetics faster, right? I filled up my rain barrel faster, it overflowed, and now all of a sudden I have, again, I had a host of things, but Addison's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, type 2 diabetes, etc. Okay, so I'm 17, dealing with autoimmune issues, Addison's disease, which is the inability to produce cortisol. So I was walking around like a zombie all day,
Wow.
debilitating allergies, insomnia, all sorts of issues. But now, more than 25 years later, I don't have any of those things. So I had them at 17, but I don't have them now. So that's why I share with people it's always in your genetics, but it is the expression of those genes through lifestyle, intended or not intended. I didn't intend to have an autoimmune issue at 17. That was not part of the game plan, right? I was just a normal 17-year-old playing sports, studying in school, had friends. That was it, just normal for the most part. But I got it. And so then I had to relearn and then unlearn how to get rid of these things. So my manifestation is going to be different than yours. And
Mhm.
you will have maybe some of those same things, but yours will come out whatever's predisposed in your genes, not mine.
Mm.
I would love to go over our results of the metals and minerals test.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
You
So
got him?
yeah, I've got them right here. I don't know if you've
We're
looked at them
nervous.
already.
This is
We're a
vulnerable. This is a
little
vulnerable
nervous.
moment, baby.
Yes, yes. I think it's great that you're doing that. I really do. And the reason is that this is the very first lab I started with on my way to getting well. And so for me,
Mm.
it's always my favorite to go through first because so I was super skeptical. And I'm like, what is this test going to show me? And I met with a practitioner and they started to break it down. Hopefully, I'll be able to do some of that here today. And it gives you some insight into what's going on inside of your body. So, this minerals and metals test is also the easiest lab to run.
Yes.
So, that's why I love people to start with it because 3 years old through 100 years old, you could run this. You're just taking a couple snips of hair and you're just using within an inch and a half of the length of your hair in the back. That's it. And so what we're going to look at is your electrolyte levels, which are going to show stress, your mineral levels in your body, so the micronutrients we spoke about, and then we're going to look at heavy metals. And I always tell people if anything's off, meaning it's too high above the blue zone or too low, well, you can fix that, right? Because we're looking at a 90-day snapshot, and we know that with the right amount of work over the next 90 to 120 days, we can retest afterwards, and we can actually look at how it was affected. And so, yeah, this is a really nice lab.
Does it matter where? I got it from snip on the bottom of my hair. Does it matter what part
So
of my hair?
it does, and we'll go over that.
Oh,
So it's funny because this does happen sometimes where people use the whole strand and they cut it up into pieces. So your hair grows at about a half an inch a month. And so if you want what
dang.
happened within the last 90 days, well, you snip within an inch. So basically, you cut near the
Oh.
root, tiny amount. You go underneath the back of the hair,
Yeah.
and then that's what you look at.
Oh, oops.
Oops.
That's all right.
Mine's gonna be like 3 months from. Mine was the
Mine's
bottom.
like 6 months back.
Yeah. Mine
So
was
that's
the
what we're looking at.
bottom.
But that's okay. So that's what we're looking at now. And I've done this actually many times and on shows like this. And so you can just kind of look back at the 90
Mhm.
days before that. That's what we're looking at. So
Okay.
we're looking at that much hair sample. This is used now for autism links to heavy metals, ADHD. It's used with FBI based drug testing. So they use hair tissue testing for quite a bit. So I'm going to hand out your labs and we'll go through them.
I like
Cool.
I like hair over blood. I'm sick of blood.
I know.
Doing all the blood stuff. I'm just like,
So one of the reasons we do this is just the simplicity. So when I had my practice in Boston, we're a completely virtual practice now. We ship labs to 27 countries around the world,
wow.
which we could never do as a Boston-based practice. Uh, we would do blood draws, and the actual people who follow through on blood draws is very, very low.
Yeah, dude.
Nobody wants their blood draw. And
Yeah.
so blood draws you should still do at least once a year for just make sure that there's no disease diagnosis. But in the meantime, you can test your hormones with saliva. You can test your gut-based health and vitamin levels with urine. You can test your parasites and bacterial overgrowth with a stool test. So there's a lot of other
Mhm.
samples that you can do at home. Plus, the nice thing is about these, this is not shared with any electronic medical record system.
That's nice.
So these are completely private between the lab, myself, like
Mhm.
our company, and yourself as well. So there's your results.
cool.
And Lindsay,
Here we
there's
go.
yours.
My test results. A plus. Wow, this is powerful.
I was
So-
like,
I'm
sex F.
guessing-
I was like, did I get an F on
So
this?
since they're both perfect, there's really nothing for us to chat about.
I think this one is going to be, is this metals? I think minerals. I think there's going to be a copper thing because I had my copper IUD. So I'm going to have like a high
Mm.
copper.
Oh, that's
level.
interesting. So I should also state too, typically how this works is we would do a consultation, we would run your lab, and then I would then give you a protocol based on that. We've never done a consultation together. So I
Uh-huh.
know really nothing about both of your health, and that's totally fine as well. So my job is just to read this lab, and then you'll simply see if it makes any direct connections with you.
Cool.
Now, the nice thing is this can be correlated with other labs. What
Mhm.
you don't look at are samples that should not like when we have iron on this lab. The only time iron is necessary to look at on a hair tissue mineral analysis is if it's very high,
Mm.
and at that point you can have what's called hemochromatosis, and then we let people know, okay, you're going to go to your PCP, confirm this with a TIBC and ferritin draw, and if it is high, we need to lower that because that's dangerous.
Mm.
So all the rest we're looking at non-diagnostic and are very, very applicable. Now, for anybody obviously not watching this a video, the first four are your calcium, it's going to be your magnesium, it's going to be your sodium, and it's going to be your potassium. When people see elevated levels for these, they're like, oh, I'm taking in too much calcium. It's not that. When your body gets stressed, we've been talking a lot about stress here today, something called hypercalcemia can happen. So your body, in a state of stress, actually breaks down calcium from either diet, muscle, or bone.
Mm.
And so you see an elevated level of calcium in your bloodstream. That's not good. Not good for the arteries. Does show higher level of stress. Now, the nice thing is if your magnesium is also elevated, what it does is it's showing that's the parasympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic calcium, parasympathetic
Mm.
magnesium. That's why people say, oh, why do you take magnesium? Well, for sleep, for anxiety, for sense of calm, right? Like that's why
Mhm.
we do it. Okay, well, what is that doing? It's inducing the parasympathetic, the rest and relax, or the fight or flight. It stops that fight or flight. And then we look at sodium, potassium. Those are essentially markers of catabolism or breakdown in the cells and tissues, energy used with the adrenals as well. And then we'll get into the minerals. Okay, so who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
All right.
Brave.
So,
Yeah.
Krista, we're going to look at your lab.
Calcium,
So-
magnesium off of the charts.
Same, baby.
Yep.
See.
Now, the interesting thing
Yes.
was, again, we've read hundreds of thousands. We do, so just for this lab alone is probably 2,000 to 3,000 of the minerals and metals tests we see from around the world. So we've got a very, very large sample size.
Wow.
And the interesting thing is, again, I'll see a couple of hundred of these a week that I'm specifically looking at. Yours are very similar. The both of your labs,
Obviously.
very, very similar. So we'll see why that might be. Now there are some differences, of course, but when we look at that, so a healthy level of calcium on this minerals and metals test between a 32 and a 64, anywhere in that blue wave is fine. Now, I've seen higher, Krista, but your level's a 596. That's impressive.
That's,
an
For what?
596, you
impressive
guys. It's
level.
supposed to be like 40.
Wait.
Yes.
It was 596.
For calcium. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. 398.
So it's very
what
high.
the heck?
Very high, but yours is exceptionally high. So we'll look at that in the greater context.
I think it's from water.
What do you mean?
Typically, it's
Listen to the
typically
doctor,
it's a-
baby. You're not the doctor.
it's a stress induced marker,
Wow.
Mm.
higher level of stress. Now we can look at why that might be. Now there are other reasons. High doses of vitamin D, so above 10,000 IUs. Typically, the studies were done on 50,000, 250,000, 300,000. They drew calcium from the actual bloodstream and from the bones and pulled it in the bloodstream. So unless that was happening, there's that. Now, the good news is your magnesium is also off the chart. So that's high. Now, but if we look at the two values, it's a 6.67 to 1 ratio. So let's just use 7 and 1 for easier math. So you're only about 50% of what your calcium is. So when we look at this, we say, okay, we still need more magnesium in your diet and through supplementation in order to bring those calcium levels down.
Wow.
And so for you, instead of just doing it in the evening when I typically would, we might do a little bit in the morning unless it makes you sleepy, and then we won't. But we'll do it in the afternoon. We'll do it at lunchtime, and we'll also do it in the evening as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have so much supplemented magnesium, so I'm surprised I would need more. I guess where am I getting all that calcium, or is it being created in my body?
So that typically the calcium is already in the body and it's being drawn into the bloodstream. So we'll take a step back. So what we're looking at right now is excreted mineral levels in your hair. So your hair is simply catching these things in the hair. That's how
Okay.
it's looked at. That's why it's so good for drug testing. That's
Right.
why it's good at looking at for prenatal based issues or
Yeah.
autism or ADHD because of the correlation with heavy metals.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So there's
and,
nothing diet wise I can do about the calcium. Is my question.
you can don't worry about getting calcium based foods. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
What we want to look at is higher magnesium based foods
Okay.
and then calming things for your nervous system as well. And then just make sure you're getting the right type of magnesium. So
Oh, yeah.
um,
That's a question I have because there's
Yeah.
so many different types of
there
magnesium.
are.
Yes.
Yes. So magnesium glycinate, a magnesium lysate, a magnesium um, citrate, all of those are calming. There's a lot of people using magnesium threonate right now. Not bad. It wouldn't be the only one I use,
Okay.
but those are good forms. And then
Okay.
when people say they're taking a lot, we're talking for you. Again, I can't give you the specific amount. I would look at other markers as well, but you're probably going to be in the range of 330 to 600 something milligrams per day. So not an insignificant amount, and not all at once, of course.
Okay.
And then just be careful with taking magnesium oxide, which is more of a laxative. That's not going to be absorbed as well. So never that. When we're looking at your sodium and potassium levels, they're pretty good. I mean, they really are. So when we look at this, we wanted a 2.5 to 1 ratio. So the good news is that there was a stressor. It wasn't just acute because this is a long term. Again, we're looking at quite a while, 3 months at least if you're using 1.5 inches of that sample size. And so just keep that in mind. Every half inch of hair is about a month's sample. And so those levels look good overall. Now, like I said, even though your iron levels are within range, we don't look at that in the hair. This is simply excretion based. You want to look at blood for iron. Now, your copper levels are elevated. This is something that we immediately begin to look at. Why? Because copper is really important because it can lead to things like allergies, skin rashes, anxiety, lower mood, attention deficit based disorder, if those zinc levels are not high enough. So we've seen this quite a bit, and it's because there was obviously a period where people were getting more and more sick or different illnesses or whatever it might be, and their zinc levels got depleted. So the more your immune system needs zinc, because it does, your immune system is basically running off of things like glutamine, B vitamin, zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D. Uh, the way that you push that down and bring it into balance is actually to bring your zinc levels up for a period of time. Now, for everyday use, you don't typically ever use more than 50 milligrams of zinc. Acute based instances, 75 to 100 milligrams for 2-3 weeks, sure. But so what we'd be typically recommending, you're going to be using somewhere around 30 to 50 milligrams, probably closer to 30 to 40 of zinc for about 12 weeks or so to push those copper levels back down. Then it's looking for sources of copper, though, that may be causing the higher levels of copper.
Do you
Exactly.
think my
'cause it
Paragard IUD could have been
absolutely. Yeah,
copper? Yeah.
100%. So we've certainly seen that before, and that's one of the things I would look out for as well.
Yeah.
Copper IUD.
It's no longer in, but I feel like it's still affecting.
And it does take a while to remove these metals
Yeah.
from the body,
Yeah.
unless you're doing something specifically for them, which we can talk about recommendation wise. These metals will stay in your body. Yeah, for sure. The higher level of manganese, this is not uncommon at all. We see this quite a bit. Probably not for yourself, but people who are drinking well water, manganese levels are often high there. So that's probably not that in the city.
Just going out to the well.
Literally.
Stress, kind of correlating back to that. The adrenals. When we see higher levels of manganese, sometimes it's lower levels of B vitamins, depleted levels of B vitamins, not keeping up with stress. I mean, that's a really big part of it as well. When we see higher levels of manganese, it can be drops in blood sugar. So kind of extending a fast too long or a fast while stress, looking at that too. And then low protein synthesis. And I actually wanted to talk with both of you about that. So I'm going to jump to the last marker, which is phosphorus. So, and Lindsay, we'll go over yours separately, but
Mhm.
your phosphorus levels were low. And that's important to really look at, because if you have high levels of calcium, you have higher levels of manganese, we've got lower levels of zinc, and we've got lower levels of phosphorus, your anabolic minerals are a little on the low side. Anabolic means building the body up. Catabolic means breaking the body down. So we see more of a catabolic process here. And it could be from either, regardless of what it is, it's either not getting enough protein in to build back up the tissue, or too much output in terms of fasting, exercise, breaking down the tissue. And so what we look at is we look at phosphorus for muscle, we look at it for bone, and then overall utilization of vitamin D as well. So that's an
Mhm.
important marker, is just to make sure. Don't go over the top with your protein, but certainly a minimum of half your body weight in actual protein per day. So like, let's just say we have someone in that they're 120 pounds. Okay. So we want a minimum of 60 grams of protein per day. That's the minimum. Again, I'm not a necessarily one for one. Sure, if we're working with a specific bodybuilder, et cetera, but most people don't need that level of protein, especially with longevity in mind. But when I talk with a lot of women in my practice, I say, okay, you eating breakfast? Like, no, not really. Okay, so what are you having at lunch? I'm having a salad with some chickpeas or some hummus and whatever. Okay, oh, good. You're getting vegetables, all these different things in there, but you're maybe getting like 10 grams of protein. Okay, and then what are you having at dinner? Oh, I'm having a piece of fish, or okay, so you're getting like 30 grams of protein, 35 grams of protein. We're at like 45, 50 for the day. Like, we're under the amount of protein we need
Mm.
for active individuals. The more active you are, the more you're using those muscles, the more potential catabolism there is. So really important marker to look at. I love this lab for that. And then again, interrupt me, feel free, as we're going along. Your chromium and selenium are a little bit low. Your chromium, though, is what we see totally normal. This goes back to soil degradation.
Mhm.
You can't get enough chromium in food anymore.
Mhm.
I'm just convinced of that.
Mm.
We use a software that looks at the macros and micros of foods. And when we look at it for each individual, even on a diet that's great, they're still missing one or two things. They're missing zinc, they're missing calcium a lot of times. Like in my diet, I eat a pretty diverse diet. I try, but I'm still low most days on one or two
Mm.
different things.
Wow.
And it's because you have to be so critical to get those things in. So that's why I say minimal, a little bit of supplementation, you'll be able to get there. But chromium is what's used for blood sugar. It's a big one. And so if you have erratic blood sugar, or it's not as good as you'd like it to be, chromium's a big one there. And then selenium. And that's why I love running this test. And I love, for the next one I'm going to recommend for you would be the stress, mood, and metabolism test. It'd be a great one to look at your cortisol levels, estrogen levels, progesterone. It'd be great to look at your vitamin D levels and your thyroid, because your selenium is a little on the low side. Selenium is used for that thyroid. It's used as a very powerful antioxidant. So I would want to take a look at that just to make sure it's optimized. Because for women, especially, again, women and men, but your TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, which is typically the only thing your PCP runs, should be between a 0.5 and a 2.
Mhm.
So if you're a 2.7, you're considered totally normal. But now you're trending out of range. Your thyroid's not optimal. So again, a lot of times we tell men and women, like, to lose weight, to do this, to do that. It's just calories in, calories out. No, it's optimizing hormones. It's optimizing blood sugar. It's optimizing, for energy, right? So your
Mhm.
thyroid helps with energy. What if you have cold hands and feet? You want to look at your thyroid. What if you have thinning hair, thinning eyebrow? You want
Yeah.
to look at your thyroid,
Yeah.
eyebrows. So you want to look at that. It's all very, very important. All right. So then we move down to your heavy metals. And we see lead, none. Okay, that's the most important one. Good. Mercury, we've got one little tick. It should be 0, but
Mhm.
not that bad. And we'll talk about that. Cadmium, 0, which is great. Again, that's good for the thyroid. Arsenic, very, very, 0, which is good. It's what it should be. And again, it means, can't really find it, 0.002. So it's almost non-existent. And then we've got aluminum, though, almost a 3. So,
1.25.
So 1.25 is what we typically see, because aluminum's so pervasive in the environment. You definitely have higher levels.
Yeah.
So we'll chat about aluminum for a minute, because this is the most pervasive heavy metal that we see on all of these heavy metal
Mhm.
labs.
Probably because of deodorant.
That's a big one. So antiperspirants.
Yeah.
So
I don't use aluminum. I don't use deodorant.
So we've got that's all right.
Whatever,
Whatever,
mate.
dude.
Aluminum pans is a big one.
Wow.
Aluminum foil is another. Water filters that have an aluminum filter is another big one too, or just tap water.
Berkey?
Nope, the Berkey is going to be fine for aluminum.
Okay.
Yep, the
Is the
Berkey's
Berkey
What
working good?
Yeah, literally.
the-
What about cans of soda, or like what about
Yes.
sparkling water in aluminum?
Yes, absolutely.
Whoa.
Yep. And that could be your
Uh,
nickel as well. Because I was going to ask you, why is your nickel elevated?
I don't know, man.
We don't typically see elevated nickel. It's an
Whoa.
That's
interesting one.
interesting.
But
yeah.
For the nickel, there are some random ones that it could be. So if you drink rooibos tea, are high levels of nickel. Oysters can be high levels of nickel. We also see it with peanut butter, commercial peanut butter. Probably not
Fucking
eating.
love peanut butter.
You really? All
Yeah.
right. So sometimes, sometimes we see that from there. We can see it from hair dye. So nickel is often in hair dyes as well. It's in some cosmetics. They often put metals in cosmetics because it gets it to stick. It gets it to keep that consistent color, and that's on there as well. Smoking, detergents, aluminum foil again, nickel-backed jewelry, amalgam fillings, not typically from food. So I just wanted to let you know that like mushroom extracts have been found to have some nickel contamination in them, but that's about it. Because mushrooms are actually a
They're
I
They're
eat a
filter.
lot
Yeah,
of
they're filter.
mushrooms.
exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of
So,
mushrooms.
but that's one to look at, and because certainly we
Yes.
want to bring the nickel down. You know, it's
Yeah.
an odd one to have elevated. So we just want to bring that down, and all the rest of trace minerals are
I'm a
fine.
unique gal.
You are unique. All right. So overall, Krista, though your lab was good, what are we working on? We're working on the
Yes.
elevated levels of the stress. We're working on the elevated levels of copper, and everything has a antagonist on these labs. So what pushes down calcium? Magnesium. What pushes down sodium? Potassium. What pushes
Okay.
down copper? Zinc. So we always know what the levers are and how to pull them.
That's cool.
And then for heavy metals, we don't want any heavy metals in the body. So we're going to be using things like a heavy metal detox-based protocol. Very simple. It's vitamin C, Craxel, chlorella, cilantro, biofilm disruptor.
And they can get it from Equilibrium.
Yep, from
Okay.
EquiLife.
EquiLife.
And
sorry.
that's okay.
Name
And
change.
then infrared sauna is also great.
Oh, we
So
have
if you
one
have
at home.
access to an infrared sauna, it's fantastic.
Perfect.
Awesome.
I have it at home.
All right,
Because you'll sweat
Lindsay.
it out.
And that's right. So and again, everything's been studied. So when you look at the sweat of someone after an infrared sauna, you can actually see the elevated levels of mercury, and you can see the aluminum coming out through the body. So it's pretty fantastic.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great way to do it.
Wild.
And there's really not a limit on that. You could do an infrared sauna 5 days a week,
Wow.
6 days a week, and that's fine. All right, so let's pull up Lindsay's lab here. Lindsay, for yours, what we are looking for is a more unique pattern. This is considered a 4 high. So a 4 high means all of your electrolytes are above the ideal mark, and it's just the potassium, which isn't as high as the others. This is typically a sign of higher chronic-based stress, so higher, which they call HPA axis adrenal stress. This means that for a period of time, yours was now, we're going back 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
A period of time where you had very elevated levels of stress. You would only ever see a 4 high in terms of electrolytes during high level of stress.
Yeah, I think that shakes out.
It's hard to go back that time. That is why we like to use that, the last 90 days or so, because people are like, oh yeah, absolutely, this is more current.
Yeah.
And so I would say, we'll run this again. We'll do the last 90 days. We'll get you that pertinent view as to where you're at right now.
Yeah. I feel
But-
like I've changed so much about my lifestyle and diet, like
Mhm.
in the last probably 3 months,
Yes.
I would say, or like just fitness and diet, but continue.
No,
Yes.
it makes a big difference. Now,
Yep.
although your levels were not as elevated, they were elevated. And so we
Yeah.
have to look at that. So we're still going to use what are the things that are more calming for the body. So we want to look at lifestyle factors beyond just nutritional supplements as well. It's like, what are the things that are going to calm the nervous system that are going to then allow your levels to come back to more normal?
Yeah.
So I always like to tell people there's no one specific thing. Sure, it could be meditation, but it could be walking, it could be singing, it could be whatever's relaxing for you. That's what we want to look at. And then also good quality sleep, being able to turn the mind off at night. It's such a big part of it. So making sure that if you're tracking your sleep biometrics, you're getting 90 minutes of deep sleep and about 2 hours or more of REM.
Yep.
Really important for the body and the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we look at your iron, it's going to be low on the HTMA, the minerals and metals test, but it's not what we look at necessarily as a factor.
Okay.
And then we want to look at your copper levels. Now, your copper levels were quite elevated.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, again, I'm always asking why the elevated level of copper in the body? Where's the contamination coming from? Could be from water, could be from cosmetics, Could be from multiple other factors that we can
Hmm.
kind of like dive a little bit into. But oftentimes it is the lower levels of zinc that's allowing for these higher levels of copper.
Got it.
And I think zinc is going to be one of those minerals that a lot of people are going to want to get a little bit more of in their diet, whether it's through certain nuts or different things that meats that have higher levels of zinc, or whether it's through supplementation as well. And I
Okay.
recommend both.
Okay,
Both are
great.
great. Same thing with the manganese too. Is this water contamination? Is this stress? What specifically is causing someone's elevated level of manganese? We always take little typically a deeper dive on that. Some of the biggest things we've seen, though, just to let you know, because we see it now more and more, are drops in blood sugar. So just
Mm.
making sure that you're getting enough protein again at each meal,
Mm-hmm.
enough fiber each meal. That if you're dropping low in blood sugar in the morning because of an intermittent fast, is that something you want to continue with, or do you want to break that fast and have
Yeah.
breakfast?
Yeah, I typically do fast until probably like 10 or 11. It was something that I was noticing. I'm like, this felt good for a period of time. And it also feels good on certain weeks of my period,
Yes.
or of my cycle where during my period, I definitely do not want to be fasting.
Hmm.
So I kind of like intuitively was doing it, but then I've just had that thought lately of like, okay, yeah, we need to like really nourish ourselves first thing.
Absolutely. And when we look at it overall, if we can look at our total macros or calories, et cetera, for the day, we can start to break those up over the course of the day. So it doesn't always have to
Mhm.
be, one meal a day or those types of things. But and the last part is protein synthesis. It's just making sure because that higher level of manganese, I go back to again the low level of phosphorus. I don't like to
Yeah.
see that with women because I know that the amount of bone that they created by the time of basically 27 years old or so, that's the bone they get to keep for life.
Okay.
And so I want to make sure that your muscles stay on for metabolism, your bone stays on for osteoporosis and other factors. And when we talk about longevity, yeah, I want to help you live to 100 plus, but I also want you to have a good quality of life
Yeah.
and not those hip fractures that so many women
Sure.
have, later in life. So we want to look at that, really make sure that we are getting that adequate level of protein on a daily basis. It's going to keep you satiated. It's going to bring your zinc levels up, and that's big to look at. Your chromium and your selenium levels, again, they're on the lower side, but normal if you're not supplementing with any, because
Yeah,
you're
I'm
just
not.
not getting that from food.
Should I supplement with them?
Typically, we just recommend something like the daily nutritional support or the
Okay.
daily activated multivitamin. And the
Great.
reason is that you're not getting a mega dose, but you're getting the 100% of the RDA that you should get.
Okay.
So it's like that minimum amount, and then you get the rest through food. And anything that your body doesn't need, you're just going to remove. That's the
Okay.
nice thing. You'll just get rid of.
Yeah, I was wondering about that with like any over supplementation. Like for the most part, does the body know, like obviously to a point, but does the body know to like get rid of it or?
Mega doses can be very stressful on the body,
Okay.
so we don't want to do that. However, almost basically all of your vitamins are going to be water soluble except for vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K.
Okay.
So those four you don't want to overdo.
Got
So
it.
vitamin D on a daily basis, if you're not getting it from the sun, yes, 2 to 4,000 IU's for most adults.
Uh-huh.
Vitamin A, just through your multi, is typically 5,000 IU's from beta carotene, which is the natural, normal form. Vitamin E, don't need a big dosage, 100, 200 IU's.
Okay.
And then from vitamin K, we like it from vitamin K2.
Okay.
So you will never see K2 as part of
That's
like
what I
your
take. Yeah.
nutrition one, but you'll see it as like your after, and that's important as well.
Okay.
So really, really crucial. Uh, as well. And then we want to look at now your toxic metals. So no lead, no cadmium, no arsenic. Fantastic. We do sometimes see those. So good that you didn't have any. Your mercury was slightly elevated. Now,
Yeah.
the vast majority of people who have high levels of mercury is almost always from fish.
Yeah, I eat wild salmon. I
So that's
don't eat
okay. That's a
any.
low mercury fish.
Yeah, what else would I eat? Yeah, that's kind of all. I haven't really done, but this is also this is 6 months to a year ago based on the sample that I
Yes.
I gave. So,
It could be from mercury amalgams. It could be
okay.
from environmental exposure. It
Okay.
could be from um, yeah, fish is the vast majority. It
Sure.
can be from mercury amalgams if I didn't mention that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have any. No.
So mercury can stay in the body for a long time though. So just
Yeah.
keep that in mind. So
Got it.
when we have someone do a heavy metal detox, if you run an HTMA like 3 months later, you might actually see very elevated levels. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That
Yeah.
means it's being excreted.
Got
So
it.
we have to get to the point though where this is a zero, right?
Got
So
it.
important to look at that. And then your aluminum is typically what we see, just over that one. And that is because if you're going out and you're just having, let's say, I don't know, tea, okay, there can be aluminum in that. In ice cubes, there's aluminum in tap water. There's aluminum with pans. So the best pans to use are more like a stainless steel or
Yeah.
a cast iron if your iron's not too high, or glass, or there's other modalities that you can use in terms of cooking utensils than the aluminum foil and all these things. You have to be careful. It's the scraping of those pans
Yeah.
and the aluminum foil, which is allowing the aluminum to seep in the aluminum cans. Even aluminum water filters, which a lot of people are using with like a what's it called? It begins with a C. It's a very popular one.
Oh,
I forget what it is.
yeah,
It's
I'm
the most
forgetting.
popular water pitcher. It has an aluminum mesh filter, so you have to be careful of that. It actually adds more aluminum back to the
Okay.
water. Now it removes some of the other harmful chemicals, but it actually adds more aluminum.
Wow.
So we have to be careful with that. We want to use a good quality water filter
Do you have
for
one
sure.
that you recommend that you can say?
Yeah, so I recommend the Berkey water
Uh-huh.
filter. It's the easiest to use. It's kind of, again, I run my own independent labs on these. It removed all harmful chemicals when I ran the labs on it, but it didn't get all of the fluoride.
Got it.
But I know they're working on that. So they have fluoride filters, but they're not available. They haven't been available for the last year. I believe they're working on a better fluoride filter. Fluoride is the hardest to remove
Okay.
from the water.
Got
So
it.
that's good. And then buying spring water as well.
I know.
Again, because like if you buy spring water in glass bottles, especially like here in the US, not in plastic, it's the best
Yep.
that you can do. Again, local spring, great, but do you know that there's no bacteria in it? Do you know? It's something to think about. That's all.
Sure.
So, and then one thing I just wanted to mention is that for anybody with elevated levels of heavy metals, we're doing our heavy metal detox right away. Or if the body doesn't feel strong enough, we are getting the body strong enough. So we're doing 4 weeks of maybe the daily nutritional support, maybe some omegas, maybe a little bit of the immune protocol with vitamin C and zinc and vitamin D. Of course, good whole food, maybe
Mm-hmm.
infrared sauna, maybe get their sleep protocol, and then we're doing the heavy metal detox after that. But we are not doing the heavy metal detox with young children unless they're being supervised by a health practitioner. We're not doing it with pregnant women, and we're not doing it with anybody with extremely elevated levels of lead. We're going to use a specific chelator with that, and so
Oh,
but you
interesting.
very rarely ever see that.
Okay.
So those are the recommendations for when you see toxic heavy metals. And the last thing we just didn't mention too much is the little mark on the bottom of the page that says slow oxidizer. Slow oxidizer is very common with adults. And this just means that the body, since it's in more of a stress based state based on this lab, we are, we don't, our digestion isn't as robust as it could be because more of
Mm.
the blood is not necessarily near the stomach itself.
Got it. Okay. And what is causing the blood not to be near the stomach? Is that the heavy metals?
So anytime you're pushed more towards the sympathetic nervous system, it is not allowing your body the rest, relax, digest, and rejuvenate.
Okay.
So, our job as adults, busy people in these Western based mindsets, is to always bring the body back to homeostasis, to a part of relaxation and rejuvenation. So, it's basically okay, we can be go, go, go from 7 to 7, 7 in
Yeah.
the morning, 7 at night, but we have to turn it off at some point. We have to be able to get some downtime, put away our phones, and begin to rebuild and rejuvenate the body. Because if we're talking about people being in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, okay, not as bad, but the body will start to, as they say, go downhill if it doesn't have the nutrients, the time, or the attention to be able to
Mm.
rebuild in the same way. It just gets
Mm-hmm.
harder. It's not that we can't do it, it's just harder as we start to age. And so
Sure.
it's important that we look at it now so that your body stays strong and vital and robust.
So good. Yeah, this is very eye-opening. And I'm thinking of things that one, I love the fact that there's always that counterpart of like, okay, upping the zinc, upping the potassium in order
Mhm.
to balance the other out. But I'm thinking about these kind of sneaky things, whether it's different ways that I could be ingesting or getting aluminum into my system. And I thought I was going to be overwhelmed, but this is actually empowering me in a way because it feels like they're, to your point, you said your protocols are generally, you can see a difference in 90 days. Is that true?
So that our protocols are typically never longer than 12 weeks, but
Right.
it'll probably be two consecutive. So
Yeah.
from this particular lab, we would also run the what's called the stress, mood, and metabolism lab. And we would
Mm-hmm.
run all your hormones, your
Yep.
cortisol, your vitamin D, your thyroid. And then for me, I would also, though, run something called the Candida Metabolic and Vitamins Test. So that will look at your vitamin levels because you might be deficient in B vitamins.
Yeah.
If you're deficient in B vitamins, all of these numbers are going to look like this because you are not able to manufacture the anti-stress response. B vitamins are the anti-stress vitamin.
Mm.
So if you don't have enough of those, and it's not just, again, not just folate, which is B9 and B12 methylcobalamin, and of course you want the methylated form of them, but you might not have B1, which is so important for the thyroid, or
Okay.
B6, which is important for the nervous system. And again, not mega dosages, and there's a good amount in the daily nutritional support, the daily activated multi, but you might need just a little extra.
Okay.
And so that's going to help with that. And then it's also going to look at gut function. If there's a lot of inflammation in the gut, then there won't be absorption of all these nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say right now you're getting in a lot of these minerals right now, and you're like, this doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, if your body is not just what you eat, it's what you absorb.
Yes.
And so we need to make sure the absorption is there.
Got it.
So something like a daily digestive enzyme with meals to be able to help you break it down, great thing. But it could be, again, that there is some candida overgrowth or bacterial overgrowth. And so we'd want to look at those things. And again, these aren't scary things at all. This is just another metric. So I always tell people this is a great first lab to start with. And I think that when you start to explore your health and you do find it empowering, you're going to want to learn more.
Yeah.
And it's not a race. There's nowhere to finish too.
I
Right. So it's
know.
like, once you're good, like I'm good. I have more energy now than I did 25 years ago. So why do I feel better now? Well, because there's always more to explore.
Yes.
And you can always upgrade your health even just a
Yes.
little bit more. And you get to know yourself through these processes and protocols.
Sure.
And you find out what works for your own bio-individuality. So that's my biggest thing, is that there is no one for all approach. But if you start to see what your body needs, then you're also going to start to look at yourself as more of an individual
Mm-hmm.
and not someone that has to be like anybody else.
Yes.
You know, you're just optimizing you. That's it, in both body and mind.
Yeah. Okay. So how can people, because I know people are like, okay, I want my tests. How can people start to test, and what would you recommend? Or is there a way in which they can find out which tests are for them?
So we are a global functional medicine practice, so integrative health practice. We work with people around the world, and we do that through video-based chat. It's a HIPAA-compliant software there. But if you don't know which lab is best for you, you can actually do a 20-minute lab consultation to say, hey, these are my symptoms. What lab is best for me?
Right.
You can find that at, we can actually just link everything up on one page, which is
Perfect.
stephencabral.com/almost30. But I know for your community, we're going to share this lab as well. Just something for your community that we don't typically do.
Yes.
And again, if you don't know where to start, this is the easiest, least expensive, and most approachable lab to start with. And it's going to give you an insight into what's going on in your body. So my only recommendation, though, is to take that sample right close to the
Not
root.
what I did.
but you're not the only one. This happens literally all the time.
We're like, oh, we're getting a haircut. Let's do
Let's
it.
just do a little bit off the ends. But what it's going to do, though, is it will show you that last 90 days.
Great.
And so we have a place to start. We can help with not just nutritional supplements, but actually with what I call the de-stress protocol: diet, exercise, stress reduction, toxin removal, stress reduction, emotional-based balance. Yes, some nutritional supplements, and that success mindset that if you look deeper into your health, you're going to be able to find the root cause answers as to why you're not where you should be in terms of your overall health, your body, and I would say just overall vitality for life. I mean, it's such a big part of it.
Yes. Thank you so much.
My
I
pleasure.
always love talking to you, and this is just super fascinating. And I feel like the science is always something that sticks with me. You know, when I hear it, I usually never forget it. And those are like the little tidbits that I kind of take with me on the health journey. So thank you so much. Y'all check the show notes as well as on our website for all information regarding Dr. Cabral and EquiLife and the discounts. I'm excited for all of you to just learn more about your health. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Thanks.
Of course. Thank you, Dr. Cabral. That was incredibly informative, so thorough. If y'all are intrigued about the heavy metals and minerals tests that they offer at EquiLife, we have a special offer for you, $99, which is opposed to the $199 original price. And you can go to stephencabral.com/almost30 to get that.
Yep. Love it. Highly recommend. It's been so helpful for me. Any more information on Stephen Cabral is Stephen Cabral on Instagram. And you can find more information about Almost 30 at Almost 30 Podcast on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, and then almost30.com for all of our courses and programs. And we love you guys. We're
Love
really
you.
grateful that we can be here with you every single week. It means the world.
See you on the next one.
See you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.